Pop singer Kirsty MacColl has been killed in an accident in Mexico. She was just 41.
All I want is justice. A life has been taken. It was hardly an accident. I am focused on finding out the truth and bringing the people I believe are really responsible to trial.
But yeah, I think that's probably a memory that's not going to go away quickly.
And I will 100% see you again before the end of December for another Christmas video. I'm gonna do it. You will see me do it. I can explain. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for this, the last installment in my little Christmas series that I've got going on. I know it's not Christmas time anymore, I'm aware, don't worry, but you know, it's still kind of the festive season, isn't it? Plus, this video is on a celebrity, so you know, I'm giving you a bit of everything today. A little bit of everything from this channel, you know? Once again, this video is a very sad tale. The Christmas spirit is now all about sadness, apparently. You're welcome. This is a story that I'm sure many of you will have heard of before. It's one of those ones that dads love to bring up around Christmas. I know mine does. But I actually didn't know a lot of the details around this story before, and it's just such a miscarriage of justice that I knew I had to share it. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the English singer Kirsty MacColl, who I'm sure most would recognise from her part in one of, if not the most popular Christmas songs in the UK, Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues. Kirsty had a very sudden and traumatic death in December of 2000, and the man responsible has never, and most likely will never, face charges. Let's jump into it. Kirsty MacColl was born on the 10th of October 1959 in Croydon to the English folk singer Ewan MacColl and dancer Jean Newlove. Ewan and Jean had 2 children together, Kirsty and an older son called Hamish. Not long after Kirsty was born, her father left the family and married the American folk singer Peggy Seeger, with whom he had already fathered a child with. Kirsty was always very close with her mother and her brother Hamish when she was young, mainly due to the fact that she suffered from very severe asthma, which meant that she had to be homeschooled. Despite her homeschooling, Kirsty was a very gifted child and soon discovered her passion and love for music, writing her first song at age 11. Her passion for music continued all throughout her childhood and soon became the only career path that Kirsty could consider for herself. And in 1978, in her late teen years, this would become a reality. Kirsty had joined a local punk rock band called The Drug Addicts. Executives from the record company Stiff Records heard the band's EP, and though they weren't impressed with the band whatsoever, they were very impressed with Kirsty's backing vocals and immediately signed her to her own solo deal. Her debut single, They Don't Know, released in 1979, was played on the radio all the time, but due to a distributor strike, it couldn't actually be put into record stores, meaning that it wasn't able to make the UK charts. It was later covered by the singer Tracey Ullman, and her version did actually manage to make the Billboard Top 10, with Kirsty on backing vocals hitting all the notes that Tracey Ullman could not hit. Kirsty's first UK top hit was There's a Guy Works Down the Chip Shop Swears He's Elvis, great name, which in 1981 peaked at number 14 in the UK charts. Though Kirsty was always very popular with other musicians and with critics, it wasn't always easy for her to reach the charts. Her next few singles were pretty unsuccessful, but she was featuring on backing vocals of some of the biggest artists of the time, like the Smiths and Talking Heads. While recording backing vocals for the band Simple Minds, Kirsty met successful music producer Steve Lillywhite. The two instantly fell in love and were married in August of 1984. Kirsty's next single, A New England, released in 1985, was a smash hit, reaching number 7 on the UK charts. After this, Kirsty took a break from music for a few years to focus on raising her children, Jamie and Louie. In December 1987, Kirsty reappeared in the charts when she featured on the Pogues' smash Christmas hit, Fairy Tale of New York. She actually ended up going on tour with the band around the UK and Europe in 1988. Kirsty was never really a fan of live performances, however. She suffered quite badly from stage fright, and she was also very fearful that she just wasn't an entertaining performer. She felt that audiences were expecting this kind of bravado from a solo performer that she just didn't think she could offer to people. She always credited this tour with the Pogues with helping to overcome her stage fright, at least temporarily. Around 1994, almost 10 years after their marriage, Kirsty and Steve Lillywhite decided to split. The two seem to remain pretty friendly, and Steve Lillywhite does actually feature on a BBC documentary that they made in 2004 about Kirsty, which will be linked in the description down below, by the way, if you want to watch it. It's also where I got all the clips from for the bit at the beginning of the video. After the release of her Best Of album in 1995, called Galore, which incidentally was her first album to reach top 10 in the UK album charts, Kirsty decided to take a break from the music industry. She was frustrated with the whole business, she was suffering from a lengthy period of writer's block, and she just wanted to focus on raising her children. During her break, Kirsty began travelling in South America, particularly to Cuba and Brazil, and she really gained a love and a respect for Latin American style music. In 2000, she released her final album, Tropical Brainstorm, which garnered critical acclaim. It was a very different style from her earlier music, as Kirsty had now incorporated the sounds of Latin America into her work. One of the songs from the album, which I just had to mention because it slaps, it's called In These Shoes, and it was actually the theme song for the first season of The Catherine Tate Show. I highly recommend you go check it out on Spotify, it's groovy as hell, you won't regret it. In 2000, Kirsty began working with the BBC to produce an 8-part radio documentary series about Cuban music and culture, as it was very clear from her new album that she was very passionate about the Latin American music scene. The series was recorded in Havana, the capital of Cuba, and featured Kirsty interviewing some of the most famous Cuban musicians, including some members of the Buena Vista Social Club. Later, in December 2000, after completing the series with the BBC, Kirsty decided that she was going to take her sons, Jamie, now 15, and Louis, 13, as well as her new boyfriend, musician James Knight, whom she'd met the year before, on a Christmas getaway to Cozumel, Mexico. Cozumel is an island just off the east coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, and its economy is mostly based around tourism. It has a lot of seaside resorts, as one of the main reasons that people visit Cozumel is to go scuba diving or snorkeling, as it boasts one of the most diverse ecosystems of coral reefs, the second largest in the world, that are home to more than 1,000 different marine species. In her time exploring South America, Kirsty had become an avid fan of scuba diving, and on this holiday, her third trip to Cozumel, she decided that she wanted to introduce her 2 sons to something that she was so passionate about. It would certainly be a holiday to remember, but in the worst way imaginable. On December the 11th, 2000, Kirsty, her boyfriend James, and her 2 sons flew out to Cozumel, Mexico. They were due to return on December 20th, just in time for Christmas. Only 3 of them would return home alive. On December the 18th, around 2 p.m, 2 days before they were due to return home, Kirsty and her sons headed out to the Chancanab Reef, a 67,133-acre designated diving area protected by the National Maritime Park of Cozumel since 1996. The area itself was extremely popular among tourists, and it was restricted to only allow access to swimmers, divers and their dive boats, with a speed limit of 4 knots, which is the equivalent of about 4 miles per hour on land. Kirsty's boyfriend James did not go with them that day, instead choosing to spend the day relaxing at their rented villa. Kirsty and her sons headed out on a boat called the Scuba Shack, headed by experienced dive master of 30 years, Ivan Diaz. About 300 metres offshore, the group stopped above the reef and began their first dive. All in all, the diving part went rather well. Kirsty's sons seemed to enjoy it just as much as Kirsty did, although her younger son Louis later said that he felt that something was off the entire day, an ominous sense of dread that he just couldn't shake. When the family came up to the surface after completing their dive, the dive master Ivan noticed that something was amiss. About a quarter of a mile away, heading straight towards them at a high speed, was a 31-foot motorboat called the Percolito, and it showed no signs of stopping. Ivan was in shock. Surely the boat's captain would see the divers and swerve to avoid them, or at least try and slow down. He waved his arms and began yelling for the boat to stop, but there was no one up front looking out. Kirsty turned and noticed the boat heading straight towards her eldest son, Jamie. It was travelling so fast that its prow was raised high out of the water. There was no way the driver would see Jamie in time. Kirsty swam forward and pushed her son out of the boat's path, shouting for him to look out. The boat slammed through the group, hitting the dive master Ivan in the chest and injuring Jamie. There was a loud crack as the boat's propeller hit Kirsty's diving equipment, and the sea began to turn red with her blood. Ivan quickly ushered the 2 boys back onto the boat, urging them not to look behind them. The 2 children saw, however, the worst thing they could ever see. Kirsty's body floating face down in the water, practically chopped in half by the boat's powerful propeller. The boat, the Percolito, did not stop. It drove another 300 feet until it was forced to come to a halt due to damage sustained when Kirsty's diving equipment bent a metal bar that impeded the propeller's action. The captain of a nearby dive boat called the Nazareno, who was witness to the entire accident and did his best to maneuver his own boat in the path of the Percolito, went over to the Percolito and demanded to know why they were on the reef. The captain's reply was, "I didn't see any buoys." Ivan and the two boys were in a state of shock, unable to move or to speak. The captain of the Nazareno, Felipe Put, radioed the port captain requesting an ambulance, but he knew it would be no use. Kirsty was already dead. Those on board the Percolito never made any attempt to help. They stayed around 15 yards away from the scene, watching on the whole time. When the paramedics arrived, the scene was so gruesome that one even reportedly threw up at the sight. Two later autopsy reports, one carried out in Mexico and the other in London, revealed that Kirsty had practically been sliced in half, from the back of her neck all the way down to her waist, and that her left leg and parts of her chest were almost severed. James was called and informed that there had been an accident, but little other information was given to him. When he headed down to the Playa Corona, the beach that Kirsty's body had been brought onto, still no information was given to him. It was left to Kirsty's two teenage sons to inform James of the tragic accident. When the police arrived at Playa Corona, they spoke with those on board the Percolito, as well as to Ivan Diaz. Ivan later recalled the police officers asking those on board the Percolito, "Who was driving the boat? Who is in charge of the boat?" One man responded, "I am. I am the owner of the boat and I was driving the boat at the moment of the accident." This man was 67-year-old Guillermo Gonzalez Nova, who was, at the time, Mexico's 6th richest person. He was the chairman of a company called Controladora Comercial Mexicana, Mexico's second largest food retailer at the time, with revenues of $3.1 billion in 2002. Gonzalez Nova had owned a holiday home in Cozumel for nearly 40 years, so he would have been well aware of the restrictions placed on that area of the reef. On board the boat was Gonzalez Nova, his two sons, his daughter-in-law, his 10-month-old granddaughter, and a 26-year-old boat hand called Jose Senyam. Local police led Gonzalez Nova and his family away for questioning. Within hours of the accident, Gonzalez Nova's lawyers had flown in from Mexico City, and they made sure that that family were the first to give their witness statements, leaving many other key witnesses, including Ivan Diaz, waiting for days to give their statement. Felipe Put, the captain of the Nazareno, later stated that it wasn't until 8 days after the accident that he was asked to come in and give his statement, despite the fact that he had been a key witness and had been the man who called it in. Ivan was questioned for 3 days before his statement was completed, although he later claimed that initially police had given him a blank piece of paper and asked him to sign it, saying that they would just fill the rest in for him later. Ivan refused, saying he was not going to put his name on a piece of paper before knowing exactly what he was agreeing to. Not once did any local police, any Mexican authorities in Cozumel or in London, or anyone from the British consulate reach out to Kirsty's mother Jean and give her some explanation for what had happened to Kirsty. In fact, it was left to Kirsty's boyfriend James to inform Jean of exactly what had happened to Kirsty, even though he himself knew very little about what had occurred. Hours after the accident, and despite the fact that many witnesses had overheard Gonzalez Nova claim that he had been the one driving the boat at the time of the accident, someone else came forward to say that they were responsible. The boat hand, Jose Senyam. Senyam claimed that he was actually driving at only about 1 knot, or 1 mile per hour, that he didn't see any trace of any divers or dive boats at the scene, and that he was under the impression that they weren't in the area of the Chancanab Reef, that they were actually much further out to sea. Not only this, but he claimed that it was not until 10 minutes after Kirsty had been hit that another boat arrived at the scene. In fact, this was not even a little bit true. As well as the Scuba Shack, the boat that Kirsty and her sons had gone out on that day, there were 2 other dive boats in the area, the Nazareno and the Bongalis. Both the Scuba Shack and the Nazareno were only about 165 feet away from the accident, and the Bongalis was not much further away than that. Not only this, but Kirsty would have never taken her 2 children out to the coral reefs that were further out to sea, as it was just too dangerous for beginner divers, and I'm sure Ivan, as an experienced dive master, would have refused to take 2 young children out there. The reefs further out to sea are about 3,000 feet deep and are notoriously unsafe for beginner divers, whereas the Chancanab Reef is only about 150 feet deep and is a very popular place for newbie divers and tourists. Gonzalez Nova claimed in his statement that they were about 400 meters away from the Chancanab Reef when they hit Kirsty, but he also claimed that the Red Cross had removed Kirsty and taken her to a jetty around 400 metres away. In fact, if Kirsty and her family had been 400 metres away from the Chankanab Reef, then the distance from where they were to the jetty would have actually been around 700 metres, as the Chankanab Reef is 300 metres from the jetty. I just wanted to add this bit in because I wasn't sure how clearly I explained this, so with the help of a handy little graphic, you can see on here, I'm not sure exactly how old this is, so there's a chance that this whole map was produced after the year 2000, most likely, but you can see that on this map there's a dedicated diving area. So from the map you can see just how close that this diving area is to the shore. Like, it's ridiculously close. And there's also another picture. Obviously these people are snorkeling, so there's a big difference, but you can see these people are practically still on the shore. It's very close, so they definitely would have been closer to the shore if they hit Kirsty than they claim that they were, because there's no way that Kirsty would have been that far out to sea, considering this is the designated diving point at the reef. And not only this, but many different witnesses contradicted the family statement that they had only been going at around 1 knot when they hit Kirsty. Those on the nearby boats, Kirsty's sons, as well as locals who witnessed the accident, claimed that the boat was actually travelling at around 18 to 20 knots. Way over the speed limit of 4 knots in that area. Had the Percolito actually been driving at 1 knot, travelling around 1.7 feet per second, then it would have taken 18 whole seconds for them to go through Kirsty's group, giving them plenty of time to swim out of the way. So what, did they just sit there for 20 seconds waiting to be hit? Despite all the evidence to the contrary, Jose Senyam was arrested and released on $9,000 bail and then later sent to trial in 2002. The trial did not have a jury, although apparently this isn't uncommon in Mexico. The trial, very conveniently, omitted a lot of crucial evidence that directly contradicted the family's statement. Statements like the one made by Ivan Diaz, who claimed that though he couldn't actually see who was driving the boat at the time of the accident, since the boat was so high out of the water, but afterwards he did see that Gonzalez Nova's 2 sons were the closest to the front of the boat, nearest the controls, and he saw Senyam leap from the back of the boat into the front. Another boatman on the shore also claimed that he had seen the Percolito set off about an hour or 2 before the accident occurred, and at the helm was a dark-haired man who appeared to be one of the family. Like I said though, this information was not brought forward at the trial. Also, very interestingly, this was mentioned by a director of a local TV station in Cozumel, a man called Ricardo Velazquez, in the BBC documentary that I mentioned earlier. He claimed that under Mexico law, the person who is responsible for the boat is always the captain. If there's an accident, whether the captain was the one driving or not, he is the one who has to take responsibility for the accident as the captain of the boat. So technically, even if it hadn't been Gonzalez Nova at the helm of the boat when the accident occurred, he still should have been the one charged as the boat's owner. I'm sure you can imagine where this is going. Jose Senyam did also not actually possess a license to drive the Percolito. In fact, no one on board the Percolito that day actually possessed a license that would allow them to drive the boat in coastal waters. Gonzalez Nova, though registered as a yacht captain in 1976, was actually only permitted to operate vessels with 100 horsepower engines in coastal waters, and the Percolito had 2 315 horsepower engines. So nobody on board the boat that day was actually licensed to drive the boat. Interesting. Jean Newlove, Kirsty's mother, very rightfully pointed out that was it really very likely that Jose Senyam would have been operating the boat at the time, since Senyam was, once again, unlicensed, but also apparently didn't even know his left from his right, and he was driving a very expensive boat which had Gonzalez Nova's 10-month-old granddaughter on board. Would he really put his own grandchild's life at risk like that? Despite the fact that there were mountains of evidence to suggest that Senyam was not the one driving the boat at the time, as I said, most of this evidence was not submitted in trial. And as well as this, many locals were actually afraid to come forward with their statements, as Gonzalez Nova possessed so much power in the area. Jean later travelled to Cozumel herself and spoke with some locals, who told her that Gonzalez Nova is the Don, and I have to be careful what I say, I have a family to keep. What kind of Godfather shit is this? See, the main problem with the statement that González Nova had made at Playa Corona when he had said he was in charge of the boat at the time was that the Spanish word that he used, tripular, sorry if you're Spanish, my pronunciation is not good, but the word he used, tripular, can at once mean in command, meaning like the owner of the boat, and also mean at the helm, meaning driving the boat. So it's kind of which meaning he meant is very ambiguous and could be twisted to whatever they wanted, basically. Senyam was convicted of culpable homicide and was sentenced to almost 3 years in prison. However, get this, in Mexico, I believe, you can actually pay your way out of your jail sentence if you're sentenced to less than 5 years prison time by paying 1 peso for every day that you would have been imprisoned. In March of 2003, Senyam was released from jail after paying just £61, 1 peso for every day that he should have served. So the Mexican authorities decided that this man, who they obviously thought was responsible for negligently causing somebody else's death, could get out of jail for £61, meaning they believed that Kirsty's life was worth only £61. Senyam did actually have to pay some compensation to Kirsty's sons, which ended up being about £1,450, which, again, is not a lot of money for a person's life. But the reason for this is that the sum of money that he had to pay was based on his wages, and since he was on minimum wage, the number was adjusted to fit like a sensible number that he would be able to pay. I don't really know, but I guess this is maybe to stop people declaring bankruptcy so that they don't have to pay a fine. I know I see it all the time when people are sentenced to pay like millions of pounds for something that they've done and they just declare bankruptcy, and so the family never actually get any money from them. So I suppose, this is a good way of stopping that from happening, I guess. Either way, what's important to note here is that had González Nova, as the captain of the Percolito and therefore the man who should have been prosecuted, and the 7th richest man in Mexico, been made to pay that fine, it would have been millions of pounds more. Kirsty's mother Jean was absolutely appalled by the clear miscarriage of justice in this case. She started her own campaign group called Justice for Kirsty, which was backed by many famous faces, including Bono and Tracy Ullman. Jean wanted the case reopened, and the supporters of the Justice for Kirsty campaign were only too willing to help pay the legal fees. In March of 2004, Jean flew to Cozumel to meet with Cozumel's federal prosecutor, Emilio Cortez Ramirez, in an attempt to get the case reopened. The problem was, though, since Senyam had already been sentenced and, if you like, served his time for what happened to Kirsty, the case couldn't actually be reopened. But what they could do was bring perjury charges against the González Nova family and Senyam for lying in the initial trial. In fact, during her time in Cozumel, Jean heard many statements from locals who had overheard Senyam drunkenly telling people about how much money he had been paid to take responsibility for the crime, and boasting about how he was going to buy himself a new house in Cozumel. In December of 2005, after a 5-year legal battle, Jean was finally able to secure a subpoena for perjury against the González Nova family. González Nova agreed to give a written statement, but not a verbal one. Jean spoke with the state governor, who offered his deepest condolences for what happened to Kirsty and said he would do anything he could to support them. Jean simply asked to speak with González Nova, but she was refused. In fact, not once in all the years after Kirsty's death did Guillermo González Nova ever offer his condolences to Kirsty's family. Not once did he even try to apologise. When Jean went to Cozumel with the BBC crew, they wanted to speak with some of the original investigators on Kirsty's case. They were told that every single investigator had been moved and posted to somewhere else in Mexico. Jean said that she believed that the case was deliberately fast-tracked and received no publicity in Mexico in order to maintain Cozumel's lucrative tourist industry. In December of 2009, the Justice for Kirsty campaign ended after being told that the case was now going to be formally closed, presumably because there would no longer be anyone to charge. Guillermo González Nova had since passed away from natural causes. The campaign announced that it is unlikely that any more could be achieved. The remaining funds were divided between 2 charities: Casa Alianza Mexico, a Mexican charity that focuses on helping children who have been victims of neglect or abuse, and Cuba Music Society, both charities that Kirsty would have approved of. Since Kirsty's death, Ivan Diaz, the dive master, has moved away from Cozumel, Different sources state different things. Some say he moved to the US and others say that he simply moved to another part of Mexico. He has now abandoned his 30-year career as a diver, traumatised by the events that he witnessed on that December day in 2000. In 2001, a bench was placed by the southern entrance of London's Soho Square in memory of Kirsty MacColl, in light of her lyrics to her song Soho Square. One day I'll be waiting there, no empty bench in Soho Square. And every year on the Sunday nearest to her birthday, October the 10th, Kirsty's fans from all over the world gather at that bench to pay tribute to her. Kirsty's impact on the music world will never be forgotten, and every year around Christmas time, those who hear Fairy Tale of New York will always be reminded of Kirsty MacColl and the tragic circumstances surrounding her death. Thank you very much for watching the last in my little Christmas instalment series. Let me know if you liked it. I'd love to hear some feedback. Did you enjoy? Let me know. If you did enjoy this video, then please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to see more like it. If you want to follow me on any of my social medias, they will be linked in the description down below, along with all the sources that I used for this video if you fancy some extra reading, or if you want to check out that BBC documentary, that will be linked there as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week for another regularly scheduled type of video. Regularly scheduled is not the word I would use, but another video. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Bye!